Now we're just seeing violence over and over again. And what I'm also asking and wondering is, does that make us more sensitive or less sensitive? Is it more empathy? Is it less empathy? And I just wanted to do this movie because I thought it would really get people maybe asking these innocent questions.
Did it all start out to be this story we saw of the ABC sports crew suddenly changing on a dime, or was it going to be something else?
The script originally, was sort of being conceived of leading up to the 50th anniversary of these events, by Tim Feldbaum, who wrote and directed, and is also one of the producers. And originally, it was a little bit more broad, to be honest. It was sort of a look at how all this went down. And very quickly through the research process, after meeting Jeffrey Mason, who is the character that John Magaro plays in the film, who's a co-producer on the film, but a great collaborator to all of us, everyone quickly realized that this was actually a very compelling kind of angle to take, this sort of pressure cooker drama aspect of the intense experience of that broadcast team in that moment.
Yeah. Sometimes you stumble onto the right story when you're doing something, and this is a complete, I've never seen it from this point of view, Peter, and you get to see, like in one compressed space, basically, like 12 Angry Men or any of those movies that basically take there, and it's just riveting to see this ensemble of actors all working together to make this thing come alive.
That's really what attracted me to doing it, was that a true ensemble movie, like the many hands make light work type ensemble, like really passing it around. But also when I saw the documentary footage and you see Jim McKay, you think, right, that's our star. That's the hero of the movie. And the way he behaves in that footage, I thought was such a great example of how to be. I was like, that's how I would like my news. Like sober.
Yeah.
From a sports guy. Honestly, if he were an anchorman now, with just the way he was then, he would be the most sincere guy on the news.
Yeah.
He would. And he's sports.
And it was different, obviously, then. This was 52 years ago when this happened. It wasn't live TV. We're watching everything in real time, satellites. I loved the fact that you had to keep negotiating the bird, as you keep saying in the movie. Rune Arledge, who's the head of ABC Sports, I've got to get the time from CBS. It was a different time.
And just that idea to me, early on, I think there's this idea that live coverage is the truth, right? And of course, we've all been disabused of that now. But that's really what the idea was. Like, what's more truthful than just pointing the camera at the window and seeing what happens?
Yeah.
But then, of course, there's a whole host of other issues that now we don't really seem to care about. But what's interesting is to go back and look at the things that these guys are talking about, and what is the cat that's being let out of the bag at this moment?
Exactly, and in this day and age where we have cameras everywhere, they didn't know. I thought the scene there where, John Magaro's character is going like, oh, they're alive, and they're there. That would never happen today.
Well, and also, of course, we've seen people be shot on live television now.
Right.
This whole idea, that I say, what do we do? I'm sure all of us have seen someone be shot.
Yeah.
There were some of those early incidences. I forget who the congressman was who committed suicide on live television. Yeah. But now we're just seeing violence over and over again. And what I'm also asking and wondering is, does that make us more sensitive or less sensitive? Is it more empathy? Is it less empathy? And I just wanted to do this movie because I thought it would really get people maybe asking these innocent questions.
Those conversations, what you're talking about now, are still going on in this TMZ world we live in, where you're, as a well-known actor, are probably constantly confronted by these little cameras everywhere you go.
It's weird, I'm not. Everyone's very polite when they talk to me. I really don't have a problem. I don't know why. It's the leather jacket.
Yeah, it's amazing. John, talk about how you put this together as a docudrama, essentially, because you're using, the choice was Jim McKay is playing Jim McKay here. And a lot of the real footage is being interweaved. With that, you have to have cooperation from ABC.
We absolutely did, which took some time to broker, and we produced this film independently, and anybody who's produced or had to license footage knows how expensive it can be, and as you can see, we used a lot of it. And so it took some time to kind of get where we needed to be, but as we were going through it, it quickly became obvious that nothing that we had plans to just do recreations of everything. And we quickly realized that just the impact, even now, 50 plus years later, watching the footage, it's so riveting. We knew that nothing we could possibly do would ever come close to the electricity that's kind of crackling in all of that footage. And we went through, we have every tape that was filmed that day, even when the cameras weren't being broadcast, just when they were rolling studio cameras. So we had an opportunity to really piece together the whole timeline. And we soon learned, in terms of a production standpoint, that having that footage on set and allowing the actors to interact with that and react to it built a real sense of authenticity as we were kind of moving through production. And so as soon as we realized how powerful the footage was and kind of made the decision to incorporate it, it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And our editor, Hans Jorg, who did an incredible job, also, had a lot to do with just so like how delicately that gets integrated.
I would say the thing that also helped us was that all of that equipment worked.
Yeah.
And Tim is like an obsessive in terms of all of this. So all the rooms are laid out roughly how they were laid out. The guy doing, everything worked. The fax, this crazy old fax machine that I was using there, that thing worked. It was wild. And when you're in the real environment like that, and when he's filming the way he is, where everyone's basically in every scene all day long. And I was very warm going into this because I'd been doing the TV show Presumed Innocent, which I shot for like a month and a half. And then I went and shot this movie. And then I went back and shot the TV show. So it was like a time where I felt very excited to work with other actors. It was like a fun time. And Magaro, who had to come in on these days, they should give awards for level of difficulty with the acting. People don't realize that if you're the guy on the headset calling out the numbers that very hard to remember, he really, really did that so well. It was impressive every day to watch him.
Well, you're talking Olympics terms here of level of difficulty in gymnastics and stuff.
They have to factor that in.
Well, we have some Academy members here in the audience, so maybe they'll make that.
This is only a 4.3 in difficulty, so he's going to have to nail it. Yeah.
It's worth noting, though, that didn't come easy either. John and Peter both actually visited broadcast newsrooms in New York City and watched them do including while Sean McManus was still on the air. And Magaro especially spent a lot of time in there, just sitting there while they were doing these games and asking questions. So it was
it's its own language also is what I'm saying. It's like what he's doing is just so difficult. It's like he learned an entire way of expressing himself.
Yeah. Which he had the advantage here also, though, of Jeffrey Mason, as you said, being involved, very much involved, and is still around and still there to talk about it. Because were any liberties taken? It said a little bit of characters had to be, compressed or something like that.
Well, I think with any movie, that's designed to fit into 90, 120 minutes, you take sort of dramaturgical shortcuts to make sure that the story is told in a way that an audience can understand. I would say all the important things are absolutely factual.
And some of the most preposterous things, like dressing up like an athlete and smuggling it back and forth. Of course, that happened. Yeah.
It is worth noting. A good example, though, to point it to your question, is that John Magaro's character in the movie, anybody who's been in a broadcast newsroom, he's sort of like a composite of what would be the director and the producer character, sort of consolidated into one. Don Ohlmeyer, who's no longer with us, would have been the actual director that day, where Jeffrey was acting as a producer. And so we kind of realized as we were working on the script, it started to get, there's so many people in that room, and you're trying to track what each one of them is doing, and we realized for an audience to really emotionally anchor in the movie, we needed to have each person have a very kind of a specific emotional arc. And so we sort of consolidated. That's an example of a liberty, I guess, that was taken.
And what was going on, I found it so fascinating with the Peter Jennings character, and that they kept wanting to go back to New York headquarters here. And these guys are just sports guys; they can't do this. We are the team, and they proved them wrong. I mean, it was really an interesting thing they had to deal with, aside from everything
And then, of course, Rune went on and got involved in news. My character, yeah.
That's maybe partially because of this.
Yeah, and a certain type of news also, I mean, this is the guy who did Wide World of Sports. Yeah. And I think a lot of the way that I grew up watching sports came from Rune Ulrich. That whole idea of a story is the guy who was mostly interested in a story. And so everything had to be a story in the end, even if it wasn't maybe in life quite as satisfying as you'd want it to be. And I think that's another thing that I thought about a lot with the movie is like, who gets to tell the story? How is the story told? We have to think about news right now because of, I think the internet has just destroyed it. How to put it back together, and this idea of having some basic common story, that we all share. Like, the person walked across the street and robbed the bank. Right? Yeah. Just the basic story. So, and I talk about that a lot in the film and everything. But of course, then to me, like Dateline is bringing the story to news a little more, which I watch Dateline a lot, but it's a story in the end. It's not, and life is not quite so simple sometimes.
My first experience was working on Entertainment Tonight all those years ago, and I remember, and when they started, they basically had to have a runner take it up to a satellite. And that was like 40 years ago or whatever when that started. But I realized news isn't news in television unless you have the pictures. Mm-hmm. And that is a fascinating kind of thing now, that there's a picture for everything. Here, though, the pictures were getting out of there, and you had the Germans, where is this coming from? We're going to shut it down. They're destroying our operation. You had the families watching on this global thing. A lot of it due to Rune Arledge's ability to get this satellite time and to get this as a global news story. He was a remarkable.
Is it 700 million people or something?
900 million,
million people. I mean, and frequently, staring at an image that, like baby Jessica in the well, which was a bunch of lights around a hole in the ground, was just a window. But it became a very powerful window. Right? And I think that's a testament to the power of image, too. It's like it doesn't have to be. We add so much to that window. We add so much to that hole in the ground.
And we didn't know how that story of baby Jessica, that was in the 80s or later 80s.
Another kind of live event.
But we didn't know how that was going to turn out. It's really interesting on the decisions here. So you were shooting Presumed Innocent, and then you had to dive right into this. How much time did you have to become Rune Arledge, and how much did you want to become, Rune Arledge?
I don't know that I even think that way on some level. It's like, acting's not like that for me. Basically, I'm doing Presumed Innocent. I go to do this. I'm sure there's some of Tommy Malto in this guy. I mean, I don't do a hard stop in between things. It's just not the way I work. I'm like a fluid person. So I threw on a pair of glasses. That really helped. And I read, I'd done the research and everything. I only do movies where I'm interested in the subject matter or the person. So I knew a fair amount about it. My very good friend, Deco, did NHL hockey, and he also did the Olympics. And I hung out with him for years without even knowing I was going to do this movie and kind of being around what he does. So I had some sense of it. But the action of the movie, everyone's just going by the seat of their pants. So, I landed in Munich and started doing this days after doing Tommy Malto. It felt right. I felt like, it's harder when you haven't acted in a while to get back on the horse day one. Oh, I'm acting again. If you can kind of keep doing it, which is virtually impossible in this business, you get better and better.
Yeah. So you were able to do that. And also you're not doing an impression, obviously, but nobody really knows Rune Arledge, what he sounds like.
I'd seen I don't think I look anything like him or sound anything like him, but it doesn't really make any difference for someone like this. I really got interested in the fact that he had a family. You know, I look for things like that for me, one of the big issues in my life is always, how do I have a family and do what I do? Which is all-consuming when I'm doing it. And I'm sure he had the same issue. And it's barely mentioned in the film, but that's like something that was in my head, you know.
John, can we talk about the director, who's a Swiss director, Tim Feldbaum, and also he co-wrote it with Moritz, who is German.
Yep.
And so how did they come into this project?
So, and Tim, as you mentioned, is in Europe. He'll be over in LA soon, leading up to the release, and he wanted to send his love today. He was sad not to be here. You know, this is his third feature. It was sort of his first American story. His first, both of his. He came up sort of as a protege of Roland Emmerich. He went to film school in Munich, and his first two films are kind of post-apocalyptic, sci-fi-ish. And so this was his first kind of pivot into, you know, drama, thriller type realm. And you talk to anyone in Munich who's known Tim, and they're like, even when he was in film school, the short films that he was making, his visual storytelling and the intensity that he brings to every project was evident even as a first-year film student. He had done projects, so we produced this with partners in Germany, Berghaus Vobke, and they had done the other two projects with film, and actually with Tim, and discovered him when he was a film student. And so he kind of just came along with the project and had the idea and developed it, you know, initially there. Moritz was also a local graduate of the Munich Film School, and it's a tiny city, you know, relative to somewhere like Los Angeles. And they were all just friends and knew each other, and were kind of spitballing, like, you know, well, what could we do for our next movie? And sort of started working on that, and did a draft together and brought it to us, and then we worked on it, you know, with them for some time. But they just were always baked into the project in that way.
Yeah, it was cool that we shot it in Munich, even though you wouldn't know that. I mean, but you know, in the couple of days before filming, I remember I took one of those little lime scooter things out way beyond where you're allowed to go, and went to, you know, where the Olympic Village had been and everything, and kind of toured around down there, and just was like, okay, this happened, and this happened right here, and that just gives you a little something to go back into our little studio, Bavaria Studios. And even though we're inside, and it's really has nothing to do with Munich on some level, except that there are people from Munich working on the film, you know, and I can go visit the site and get a sense of the reality, you know.
You also had Leonie Benesch, who was in Teacher's Lounge, which was the German entry and nominated for international film. Yeah. It's an amazing movie, and she's remarkable in it. Yeah. And I met her a few times when in the last campaign they did for that movie when they were out here. And she's so key on this, being somebody that's really taking them through the German side of it and experience here.
Leonie is incredible, as you all just witnessed. Her first movie was The White Ribbon when she was 12 years old. She's one of the key young girls in that movie. Can you imagine working with Michael Haneke as a 12-year-old? Or any age, but as a 12-year-old girl especially, and the intensity, you know, that experience brought. And she's amazing. Every time she's in she was in Babylon Berlin, you know, Teacher's Lounge, as you mentioned. She's incredible, and also just a lovely human. One anecdote I'll share, and Peter, I know you love Leonie as well. She speaks with like a very crisp British accent. She's lived in London for a very long time, and you wouldn't know that she was even German when she talks. And so she actually had to work with a dialect coach to sound more German, even though she is German, and does an incredible job. But it's wild, you know, as more press rolls out around the movie, pay attention when she talks. You're like, wait a minute. In this movie, she sounds like she's sometimes fumbling through her words, but she's an interesting, you know, she's a hard-working actor and just incredible, and a lovely person, too.
She was great to work with.
Oh, she's fantastic. I mean, I wish she were here now. I mean, that's really the only way to get some Leonie Benesch. You know, the whole ensemble was just so right on. I love that feeling of just everyone putting one hand in, you know, and I actually left and went back and did Presumed Innocent, and you guys ended up shooting for like another bit, like, and that a lot of that was with Leonie, right? So I wasn't there for a fair amount of the filming, but I'd seen the Berlin Babylon, and I went back home after working with her and watched Teachers Lounge. And I'm telling you, everyone just go out and watch this movie. And I actually told my wife, I was like, okay, now it's time for another person to come to America and take over. And her name is Leonie Benish. So I really expect to see her in a lot more. But go ahead and get a amuse-bouche with Teachers Lounge before the onslaught comes.
Totally. I totally agree with her. She's the fact that she speaks perfect English and everything else, she can just go anywhere she wants.
She speaks English like you wouldn't know she was German.
Yeah. So, John, this is coming out. It's not a political movie, but it's coming out at a heightened political time with Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians and things. And can you talk about what you really feel this movie is?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and obviously it's silly to ignore the social context in which the movie's coming out. We developed and shot this movie, well before October 7th of last year, and we're almost completely done with post by the time the tragedy of the last year started unfolding. We see the movie as fairly apolitical in that sense. It's really about and told through the perspective of the journalists in that newsroom. It's a story about the media, and when we look back at it, we've certainly thought about this and reflected on it, and we think we've been so faithful to the experience of those people at that moment in time that there wasn't really anything we could have or would have done differently.
Yeah, and at the same time, what better way to think about it than in the context of one of the main issues going on at this moment, So, okay,
It's true. It's just
I accept that that's part of people's experience.
Yeah. Which is, it makes it all the more powerful too and relevant. And I think doing something that 50 years old or 100 years old or something, the relevance of it is a real reason to do it, to speak to audiences today, so that they're.
And by the way, that this latest version of the conflict has been going on for the last year, but of course, it had been relevant for a long time. Right. The issue. So yeah, I think I really do hope what it does is makes people focus on these specific issues that we're talking about. I mean, we've all talked about the rest of it in our lives all the time, and I do think that this is the way toward peace in the world is agreeing on some common story. It doesn't have to be the most nuanced, your version or my version, just the common, simple story.
It's a very human story too that we don't focus on in the booths when we're watching a football game or something that ABC Sports is doing. We're never thinking about what's going on there.
I think it's a special privilege too. In the movie business, I think first and foremost, we always are trying to make a movie or a piece of art that entertains people and engages people. But to get to do that in a way that also stimulates people's hearts and minds, I think is a very special privilege. So. Obviously, you never hope that your movie is going to be connected to something so heavy, but to be able to give people a lens through which to kind of experience their own thoughts and emotions, I think is a benefit.
Amazing. Real quick things before we go. How many shooting days was this overall for you?
We did this over, Pete, I think 36 days.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. We did 30 days in the studio, and then the Mark Spitz footage we shot in the original pool that he swam in, and the footage that we recreated footage that depicted anybody who lost their lives that day. So everything else is the original archival, but if someone's on camera and they ended up losing their life that day out of respect, we thought it was better to.
And the name of your film editor for everybody to remember is
Hans-Jörg Reisbrich.
Amazing.
Really, really incredible. We shot about 5 or 6 days on location in the Olympic Village and at the pool, and then the rest of them in the studio that Peter mentioned.
So cool. Well, thank you for coming out here and sharing all the behind the scenes of September 5, and thank all of you. Thanks, guys.